Hi, everyone. I want to take a second before I get started to begin by thanking the Ukleja Center for Ethical Leadership and the Ukleja Ethics Across the Curriculum program for this opportunity to continue to incorporate ethics in my courses and across courses throughout Long Beach State. So my name is Katie Dudley. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies, where I primarily teach tourism-focused courses. I recently received the Pedagogical Award stipend this past year in the academic year of 2019-2020. It was really important for me to take part in this program to help bring a more holistic view of tourism to my students, other faculty, and the community at large. I say this because when we think of tourism, most people think of it from a positive perspective. It brings economic opportunities, it creates jobs, albeit the quality of many of those jobs introduces an ethical debate in and of itself. But more importantly, it's fun. It's something we give ourselves as a reward. It's time to let our hair down, maybe step outside our comfort zones, or even be someone we're usually not. Remember, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, supposedly. But we don't want to think about the impacts that our joy may be causing on those who are living in or near the destination. After all, we're on vacation. This is not the time to be thinking about that. But there are choices that we make in tourism development and as tourists ourselves that may not be necessarily illegal, but are certainly at times ethically questionable. Let's start by taking a look at a destination that many of us are familiar with, New Orleans, Louisiana. Let me start this little ambiance for you. So we recognize this music. It gets us immediately in the mood to dance. We know this scene. We think about the food, the go cups, the beads. And with all this celebration, who has time to think about what is termed by many health professionals as death by lifestyle? That's all too common among culture bearers and others whose task it is to make us forget our day-to-day lives back home. Or that those who sustain the industry in New Orleans and destinations across the US, that those who create the soundtrack to our vacation make on average around $20,000 a year. Another example of what this looks like then from a worker himself in New Orleans comes from a 2015 city council meeting. The city council meeting focused on whether or not to ban smoking in bars and restaurants throughout the city of New Orleans. There were plenty of business owners present that night to plead their case as to how the ban would affect their bottom line. But then, of course, on the other side, there were medical professionals outlining the health risks involved with smoking in bars and restaurants inside. But above that, one man, Mr. Mervyn Lewis's story stood out. Mr. Lewis was helped to the microphone that night, and he stood tall, although he was weak, and he said, "I'm Mervyn Lewis. I'm a cancer survivor. I am an employee. I was an employee of Harrah's Casino, worked there for 15 years. Come February 14th of this year, they diagnosed me with cancer of the lungs." Mr. Lewis had, in fact, worked at Harrah's Casino in New Orleans for 15 years. And although his appeal to the city council was supported by health officials, it was fiercely opposed by tourism promoters. What is not included in Mr. Lewis's quote, however, is that upon being diagnosed with lung cancer, he was terminated from his job while still in the hospital and was told it was not a workplace injury. What is also missing is the fact that Mr. Lewis was never a smoker himself. Instead, he simply asked City Council So I wish you could all stop the smoking for some other people, the dealers, so that they won't have the same thing that I have. That night, City Council unanimously decided to ban smoking in restaurants and bars throughout the city of New Orleans. But rather than confront many of these issues, tourism promoters have become skilled in averting the tourist gaze away from such impacts. For instance, think of a time you may have traveled to an all-inclusive resort. Whoops, let me go back a little here. You may have taken a shuttle that looked like this. What was the shuttle ride from the airport to the resort like? Were there drinks? Was there a film playing? Was there upbeat music? All of this works together rather than some sporadic organic situation. It works together for a well-orchestrated attempt to keep the gaze inward and not on the poverty on display on either side of the shuttle bus. We also see this now come to life during the COVID-19 pandemic. When the first cases tore across cruise ships, we rarely heard of the workers who were trapped on the ship, some for months because either their home countries would not allow the ship to dock because of restrictions or the ships would not travel there themselves. But at the same time, tourism was hit hard because of the pandemic, and many workers who were already struggling to make ends meet due to the quality of jobs fell quickly into economic despair. So as a correction, people fought to open up tourism in places such as Florida and South Carolina, and most recently with the reignition of the cruise industry. And those living and working in the destination were now faced with even more dangerous health dilemmas moving forward. So this is the complex messiness of tourism. What is the right answer? There isn't one. What we can do is look beyond the black and white of economics and tourism and make decisions rooted in ethics. This applies to tourists as well. For instance, would you take part in this? It's not illegal. You may not overtly be harming anyone, but is it ethical? Does tourism belong everywhere in all walks or parts of life? My suggestion for anyone applying this year is to think of just that, to reflect on the debates that you notice in the classroom. Often when there are two or more passionate positions, it's ethics that lies at the center. When dealing with wicked problems that run rampant throughout fields such as tourism that cross cultural boundaries and moral norms, there is no right or wrong. But when we step back and look at it through ethical frameworks, we can often find a better answer. For some fields, this may be somewhat more obvious as to how ethics fits into a course, such as business, medicine, or law. But for others, such as tourism, it's not as obvious. So if you're having a hard time figuring out where to begin, I suggest reflecting on the habitual conduct in your respective field. Conduct that is repeated and unquestioned over time. Conduct that has invited the development of rules, standards, and principles. Conduct that makes us believe what is appropriate, authentic, and for the good of members of society or a social group. How did all of this come to be? Question this. Question who set the status quo. Who could be excluded by it? Who could be harmed by it? And who stands to benefit from it? This will help you not only begin to put into words why ethics is an important part of your curriculum, but also better connect with our diverse student population. Finally, I would say to follow Simon Sinek and beginning with the end in mind. What would you like your ethics module to look like? For myself, I knew I wanted to have a debate. I wanted to push my students toward their learning edges to make them question their preconceived notion of what tourism is and how it fits into society and their own role as tourists. Thinking about what this debate would look like helped me to better clarify why it is important to integrate an ethics module into the course and what the learning outcomes and assessment methods would look like. And I'm happy to say that I was able to incorporate the ethics module into my Intro to Tourism course this past semester, and the discussion surrounding the readings and the debate was even better than what I could have hoped for. So I hope that all of you decide to apply for one of the two different stipends that are offered. And I would be happy to answer any questions or share any material should anyone want more information. Again, thank you to the Ukleja Center for Ethical Leadership and the opportunity for me to be part of the program. I look forward to hearing what the new applicants have come up with.